No, wait. Are you denying that?
Denying what?
That Muhammad had this black slaves?
I'm not denying anything. I want you to prove it to me.
If you're not denying it, that basically means that you're my side, brother.
He came and he said,
And you own
we have to abolish slavery. That's one of the things he said. That's a fact.
But he kept
But that doesn't
slaves.
necessarily mean that he's an abolitionist in
Okay,
Islam.
so-
he himself kept slaves.
He abolished bacon. He didn't abolish slavery.
No, I want to know though. Okay, Bedouin, hold on. Is that something new that you've learned today?
I got that Muhammad had slaves.
I mean, own slaves.
Black slaves.
Is it something new that I've learned?
Yeah.
I didn't know that he had slaves and that he deals with slavery and slavery was legit.
So now how do you deal with that?
How does that impact you? Like, what does that mean to
In
you?
terms of morality and ethics.
If he had slaves and he dealt with slavery and he was open to do it, then obviously it's wrong. 100%. But I'd like obviously to see how he done that.
I love the brothers here who are just straight honest.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't
You know
know
what I'm saying?
everything.
Yeah.
I don't know everything, but at the same time, if I can prove to you that he did have slaves,
Yeah.
or he freed slaves, should I say,
Yeah.
or that slavery was wrong, or we encourage as Muslims to free slaves, then what would that say to you?
It's true.
And then what would your views on Muhammad be after that?
Indeed, 100%.
And then what would you think? Would you think he's a better person than how you think now?
That's a good conversation. I don't know who wants to have that conversation. I'm just trying to be like out of the conversation. Who's got that nice smelling stuff like right now?
Not me.
No one. Somebody's smelling sweet. Who's smelling sweet? It's you. Oh, okay. I need some of that.
Go, bro, H.
Oh God, you lot have your conversation, man. I'm glad to help.
Sorry. Pull my eye out. Harry. This is just kind of like the most notable of Muhammad's slaves. The more notable. Safiya bin, can I pronounce that name? Given to Muhammad by his official whom he freed, whom he freed, and who may have become his wife.
Okay.
So he freed her to become his wife.
Okay, do you know the rights she gets as a wife?
But
Don't know.
she was a slave.
And he freed her, and then he married
to
her.
become a wife.
Okay, and you
So
think
he
that's a
didn't,
bad thing?
well, he didn't free her to go. He freed her so that she becomes his wife.
But you know, in Islam, you can't marry someone that doesn't want to marry you. You can't marry someone that doesn't want to marry you.
So I'm simply saying that today you kind of like really understood that Muhammad did have.
So he had a slave,
More
he
than
freed a slave,
and he
married her, and you think that's the wrong thing.
Hold on, you're using this one example.
I'm just using an example you brought to me,
but
bro.
there are other examples of Muhammad, and the guy Kalam showed you.
another example.
But he showed you the hadith.
Okay, show me another one.
But how many do you want to see before you can? You yourself said that this is wrong.
They just attack.
There is no attack there.
It's cool.
You can't even debate with me.
It's cool. So you showed me one. The one that you showed me now, someone gave him a slave, and he freed them, which you said that he didn't do before.
But that was just
Okay, but
there's
bro,
three here.
come on, let's just agree with what you said before. You said that he had slaves and he traded in them. So you've just shown me something that he's freed them and he's married her. And what I'm saying to you, do you know the rights of the wife? You said no. The woman will have a lot of rights as her being a wife now. Yeah? So how is that wrong? How is that a bad thing?
Is she free to just bounce up and go where she wants to?
What do you mean as a wife? Would you let your wife bounce up and do what you
Well,
want?
let me ask you something, yeah? If you're a slave, do you have freedom to go?
No,
Why not?
because you're a slave.
Because you're a slave.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, this woman, did she have the right to just go where she wants to go?
When she was freed, yeah.
How do you know?
She's free.
But no, she's his wife.
But she freed him.
She's only free.
No, listen, let me explain it again.
She's only freed by
freed her.
virtue
He
of.
freed her first of all, yeah? Then after that he married her.
Yeah.
So in Islam, you can't marry someone that doesn't
So-
want to marry you.
so why-
she could have
why
said
didn't he
no.
just- why did
So
he have
if she
to-
said
hold
no, if she said no, she would have been a free woman, right?
Why did he have to marry her? Why did he just say
He
go?
didn't have to.
So why did he though?
Why not?
But that's the point I'm trying to make to you,
What's
right?
your point?
That slavery is something which Muhammad has black slaves.
Okay.
He owned black slaves. You know this is wrong. I know this is wrong. Everybody
I
knows
know
this is
slavery's
wrong.
wrong.
So I'm
Slavery's
saying,
wrong, but I don't know.
If there's any true word about anybody having slaves and black slaves, it is that. Go to your hadiths, go to your Quran and investigate.
Show it.
No. Go and first find out.
Okay,
it's
alright,
like there's too much work.
It's like you're basically saying that you don't want to believe that Muhammad had slaves.
I'll believe it if you prove it.
But
The one you just
see,
brought
hold on. He's shown you on Sunnah.com that Muhammad had slaves.
I don't know Sunnah.com.
But
I don't know what
he showed you the hadith.
I don't know that hadith.
You need to know the context. You need to You said prior to that, before we showed you, you said show us. Well, now we're showing you. Now you're saying you don't know the context. Do you know, man?
You just showed me.
Come on, man.
You just showed me, right?
So then maybe you need to read it and research it yourself.
We both need to read it.
Okay, maybe, but at least you know the research. In the past,
you're the one that's telling me.
yes,
You're the one
because in the
that's
past
telling
I've studied it and researched
Okay, so
it,
show me
and I'm saying to
something.
you,
So show me something.
but we did already.
So show me another one, because the one you just showed me.
You haven't
said
researched
that
it. How
she
you been able to say it off the top
and
of
he
your
said
head?
he married her. So how can you make me seem like I'm in the wrong when you show me?
Because the Prophet had slaves. This is factual. You've been shown already.
So you don't want to show me no more?
No, wait. The one that I showed you, are you denying that?
The one you just showed me now?
No, the one that was shown to you on Sunnah.com. Right?
Find it again.
No, wait. Are you denying that?
Denying what?
That Muhammad had this black
I'm
slaves?
not denying anything. I want you to prove it to me.
If you're not denying it, that basically means that you're on my side, brother. Muhammad had black slaves. People of melanin, he owned us.
If someone told me and someone got run over in Oxford Street and I say I don't know,
But we're not
so
dealing with
means
that
I agree then.
conjecture. We're not dealing with that.
We are.
We're dealing with somebody who
You're saying
showed
to me
you the
because I'm
hadith
saying-
that Muhammad had slaves.
So show me.
But he showed you. You read it.
Why can't you show me now? I don't get it.
The point is that Muhammad had slaves.
What's your point after that?
Muhammad had slaves. That's a big enough point that's in itself.
So what
Denies
is
prophecy.
In itself, yeah. In itself, that's a. Would you have slaves?
I don't want to be in the video. innit?
Would anybody here have slaves?
behind slave?
Would any of you have a slave?
Behind slave. I wouldn't have a slave.
Why not?
I wouldn't have a slave because it's wrong to have slaves.
It's wrong to. But did Muhammad have slaves?
At the time he
So then
came
is
down,
Muhammad
he-
wrong logically?
No, he's not wrong.
You people don't want
wrong.
to. It's like the problem is here.
bro,
The problem
listen,
here
bro,
is
you
right.
you do have to go back to the context, yeah?
He doesn't know the context, he doesn't know
If
history,
at
he
the
doesn't know
time of history where he came about, there was slavery around, yeah? All around the world. Is that true or false?
You tell me, brother. You tell me. I'm listening to you now.
You know the
So
context
it's
of
true.
history. You know
So
history.
all around the world there was slavery, yeah? Blacks had black slaves, white people were slaves, everywhere in history.
Yeah,
there
but
was
none of
slavery.
them was not the example
let
to
me finish.
mankind.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Come on,
so
man.
he's come at a time where slavery was legal. He came and he said,
And you
you
own
have to abolish slavery.
owns
That's one of the things he said. That's a fact. So you're saying to me,
Can you show
that
me
he-
where he said that's abolish slavery?
So many hadiths that talk about freeing slaves
no
and
worries, no
rewards.
worries, no worries, no
You don't want to pick those ones.
I don't mind, man. We can be objective. I want to see where he says free slaves, but I also want you to
so
acknowledge
now,
the fact that
now
Muhammad
wait,
had
let's
slaves.
stay on the topic. So now, give me 1 minute to Google if Muhammad freed slaves, yeah, or to say abolish slavery. That's what you're gonna find
How
out.
do you talk with people that know about this, that are able to discuss this more with them?
Let's just go to the BBC website. See what they're saying, yeah. BBC. Okay, you don't want me to go to BBC?
No, it's up to you, man. This is your evidence. You're the one that's-
I won't go to BBC. Okay, I won't use BBC.
Compare the two. Compare the two. No, you're running away. You know I'm talking about. All right, so you're saying Muhammad is right.
Islam is slavery.
I don't understand the argument. What is
He's basically saying that Muhammad was a bad guy because
No.
he traded. Okay, he said Muhammad had slaves and he traded in them and he didn't free them.
No, I'm asking you about.
You didn't ask me. You was telling me.
Do you have slaves?
What was the question you asked me
We
initially?
established the fact that you don't have slaves, right?
But there's not slavery right now, bro.
There is slavery in Libya. There's slavery in Sudan.
I legally can't have a slave.
Yo,
gangs, that's not
excuse me,
Islam.
is there slavery existing in the world right now? Because whenever you say something and I try to...
bro, you're telling me to look for something to show what
You
Muhammad
just said
said about
you
slavery.
just said that there is no slavery. And I'm telling you there is slavery
I
right now.
legally can't have a slave. Whether I
You
want one
cannot,
or not.
but there is
You just
slavery right
asked me,
now.
do I want to have a slave?
No, I
Legally-
said, do you have
Bro,
slaves?
let me just finish finding what you said about having Muhammad in the
You
Muhammad
guys
in
kind of
slaves.
like, you go all over the place, man.
Bro, I think you're losing your plot, bro. Just chill out.
What are you looking for, bro H?
I'm looking for the hadiths that outline that Muhammad had particular slaves, and some of them mention the names.
Okay. Jacob. Jacob.
That's it. Islamic slavery. That's it. Define it. You say Islamic slavery, remember? Define it.
Jacob. Jacob.
Okay. The reason for slavery is kufr. Yeah? Which means disbelief. So if you do slavery, you're a disbeliever.
You can't be anyone's slave, really and truly. There's only one Allah, one master. We're all slaves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for you to have slaves,
Okay, look at this now. Quran, yeah? Chapter 6, verse 115. Yes, it is good for the master to free the slave if he becomes Muslim. The lawgiver enjoined the courage that open many doors to it.
Yeah, but you're showing Muhammad freeing slaves, right?
Your forefathers, when the Christians say your forefathers, what were they? Your forefathers.
What if he doesn't become
Your
Muslim?
forefathers.
What if he doesn't become Muslim? What if the slave doesn't become Muslim? Is it good to keep a slave there? Why not?
Why would it be good?
No, but because in Islam slavery is permitted, and it's saying free him if he's a Muslim,
You believe in that?
or if it's a woman and you get her pregnant. I believe you're also supposed to marry her. No, you don't. And I think you do. I think the law is if you get impregnate your slave woman, you marry her. I don't know.
Okay, and if that is true, is that a good or bad thing?
I don't think it's a. I think slavery is a bad thing.
No, but if you get your slave, just say.
I don't think you should be able to have relations with a slave because they have no consent. That would be considered rape in my eyes.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But if just say, for example, he does get her pregnant,
I don't
and he
think
marries her.
That's like saying if someone murders somebody but he gives money to the family, is that a good thing? I would say no, murdering someone is wrong, whether you give money to the family or not. I'm saying you shouldn't murder someone to begin with. You shouldn't get a slave pregnant because you shouldn't have a slave to begin with.
So why did Abraham have a slave and get
So
pregnant?
so first and foremost,
answer the question.
No, why don't, can I answer my,
Yeah.
So my question is, I think slavery is wrong, whether it's in Judaism, whether it's in Christianity, whether it's in
So
Islam.
Abraham was wrong to have that.
So first of all, it's
Abraham wrong?
Ebed. It's
Was he
not
wrong?
slave. It's not slave.
Was he wrong?
It's not
Can I read
slave.
some stuff?
He didn't have a slave. He had a servant.
Yeah?
Oh, come on. You
Do you
couldn't
speak
answer the
Hebrew?
question.
Do you speak Hebrew?
You couldn't answer the
I just
question.
answered it.
I asked you a simple question.
And I gave you a
So
simple
this
answer.
No, you
is,
didn't.
this is
You changed the word.
This is Surah chapter 33.
You changed the word in to suit
and this is how
yourself.
the Quran justifies slavery.
Change the word in. You changed the word in.
Prophet,
Anyway, to come back to
we have made lawful to you
typical of what?
the wives to whom you have granted dowries, and the slave girls whom God has given you as booty. That's Surah 33:50. So the slave girls, so this is Islam justifying slavery because the slave girls are now seen as booty.
Okay, so what it was, if there's a war and they don't kill the children or kill the women, then what are they meant to do with them?
You don't keep them slave. You let them decide what they want to do. If they want to join your people, then let them join your people. But you don't capture them as slaves. Imagine we went into Iraq today. Imagine if the Americans went into Iraq today, slaughtered the men,
Like they
and
did
then
20 years
took
ago.
the slave- and
Like they did 20 years ago.
Yes, they did go in, but then they took out the women.
they didn't
and
take out
the
slaves, did they?
Well, slavery is wrong in any generation. In the time of Abraham, in the time of Moses, in
Time
the
of
time
David,
of Muhammad,
time of David,
and
he did
today,
exactly the
slavery
same.
is wrong.
Time of Solomon, he did exactly the same.
Anybody who owns
Slavery
slaves is
is
wrong,
wrong. Slavery is wrong.
right?
And any slave is
You,
wrong.
by your own admission, you said that you'd never. This is something new for you,
What is new for me?
like Muhammad having slaves. By your own admission, you said
No. What was new for me is you're saying to me that he had slaves and he traded his slaves, you said, and he didn't free them. That was new to me.
Okay,
From
so
what I knew,
yeah.
there's hadiths that I've seen previously, whether I find them or not, that stated that you're meant to free slaves and there's reward in freeing slaves.
So you knew Muhammad had
So,
slaves.
for
then?
example, Bilal, who's one of his companions, was a slave, and he freed the slave and was one of his closest companions.
But you knew
so
that
why would
Muhammad
you
had
do that?
slaves.
So why would he do that? If slavery was something that he was doing for a profit.
Okay, so it wasn't new to you that Muhammad had slaves. you knew that Muhammad had black slaves and had slaves.
Slaves isn't what?
Slaves that he's not free to just
Nah,
simply.
it was new to me. I didn't know for Muhammad to have slaves. That was new to me. For Muhammad to have slaves, especially, and what I'm saying is, if he had slaves, couldn't pay for their own ransom, yeah, that were not allowed to marry, that didn't have no right to get free, that were treated as slaves as the Atlantic slaves. That's completely new to me, and I'd like you to show me that.
Yeah,
Because I never knew that.
I've got some
and I wouldn't expect
Buhari,
him.
and
I
I've got,
wouldn't expect him if he's a prophet to do so. 100%.
That's fair. Show him this.
so this is Buhari, right? And Buhari, this is volume 7, 137, and it's narrated by Abu Quduri. Is that familiar to you? Okay, I'll read it anyway.
It's not.
We've got female.
Let me see the hadith.
It's Buhari and it's volume 7, 137. We've got female captives in the war booty, and we used to do coitus interruptus with them. So we asked Allah's messenger about it, and he said, "Do you really do that?" Repeating the question thrice. There is no soul that is destined to exist, but will come into existence to the day of resurrections. In other words, Muhammad here, the Muslims had taken slaves, right? And they were having sex with them. And Muhammad was now approving of this.
And saying
He was now approving of
this.
this,
Interrupt this is that
right?
you pull out so you don't impregnate the woman. That was the question. Is if we're having relations, do we have to pull out?
But he was saying to them, I don't approve of this pulling out. So you can have the sex, but when you're about to, don't pull out. That's
Because if you're going to have a baby, you're
Right.
going to have a baby because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
but the man is still saying that they're slaves. Okay, that's number one. This is volume 3, verse 65, by the same narrator, right? The free slave of Ibn Abbas.
Free slave, yeah.
Yeah, the free slave of Ibn Abbas. That Miyama bint, I can't pronounce this, told him that she had manumitted a slave girl without taking the permission of the Prophet. On the day when it was, you read this one. On the day when it was her turn to be with the Prophet, he said, "Have you really?" She replied in the affirmative, "You would have got more reward if you have given her, the slave girl, to one of your maternal uncles." In other words, here was a freed slave woman, but Muhammad is saying that she would have got more of a heavenly reward if this slave had been given to one of her uncles. So in other words, she wasn't allowed to go free. This is Buhari.
That's all over. That hadith appears everywhere. It's
So
like,
sorry, say that again. So basically, she gave a slave to someone else, and
A woman frees a slave, right?
very, very
The woman
she
goes to
freed the
Muhammad. The woman frees the slave.
So they did free slave. They did free slaves. Then.
The woman did, yes.
So Muslims did free slaves.
I don't know. This
yeah,
woman
no,
did.
Muslims definitely free
No,
slaves.
because we initially started with him saying
No,
that
but
Muhammad didn't free
it's what you're
slaves.
saying. If your slave converts to Islam, then it's a big. I don't know what the word is in Arabic, but it's a big
but if
thing
they-
to set
and if they
them
don't?
free. If they don't, then you can keep them. There's another hadith that talks about don't beat your wife like you'd beat your slave.
So when you
There's-
keep them as a slave, what rights did the slaves have?
So
under
this-
Muhammad, peace be upon him?
Well, they can't. Can they go home?
No, I'm just asking.
That's
to
the
answer your
biggest
question,
right that
to answer-
everybody should have.
one of the greatest things that we would say in today's modern society is that if you're having relations with a woman, they have to consent. One of the big things that a woman, to my understanding, and I'm not Muslim, so you probably know more than me, or certainly the brothers here will know more than me. The woman has no consent as to whether she has or doesn't have relations with her master. So that for me is a problematic statement. There's things in Judaism that are problem Jewish. There are things in Judaism that are problematic as well for me, and so I think
This
it's
is,
not intellectually consistent. So there are rights in Islam that a slave doesn't have. One of them is the right to say no to her master.
That's the right they don't have.
They
so,
don't-
what, so what rights do slaves have under Muslim rules?
So you'd be much better posed to answer that question being of the Deen of Islam than a Jew, and I don't know what this man here is, Christian. So what right do you believe that slaves have under Islam?
I don't know.
They don't have the right to go free. They don't have the right to say no to their master. They're two things
So
I know that
do they have
don't
the right to get married, for example?
So they can marry amongst each other, and I believe
So you
if
do
the
know quite a bit then?
if the master impregnates the slave girl, I think, and I could be wrong and I'll get corrected in the YouTube comments, I think he has to marry her. I think it's certainly a meritorious thing to marry her if he gets her pregnant, but I'm not sure of that, and the YouTube comments will correct me if I'm wrong there.
So they have certain rights.
Yeah, Islam isn't this like demonic thing that everybody says it is, but I'm saying in today's society, slavery is wrong. We both agree that slavery is wrong.
So do you think Muhammad believes slavery is wrong?
I believe that Muhammad, from his teachings, he believed that setting free his slaves free in certain situations was a good thing. In other situations, he clearly didn't. He gave a hadith where he said it would have been better rather than freeing his slave girl to give it to the uncles. We also know he traded in slaves. So certainly there was a progressive nature to setting some slaves free, particularly if they converted to the deen of Islam. But in other situations, it would appear that,
generally speaking, he was trying to free slaves.
No, I would say he was trying to free some slaves. But I would say if you look at the time where Muhammad lived, that was a completely normal thing to do. But I'm saying by today's standards, it's not normal.
So you don't think he came to abolish slavery?
No, I don't think he came to, because if he came to abolish slavery, there would be an explicit line in the Quran which doesn't talk about that which your right hand possesses. It talks about all slavery is wrong and set all free slaves free.
There is so much here regarding Muhammad and Islam and slavery. I don't even know where to begin, bro. Honestly, it's just like a long page cataloging all kinds of slaves, and it's giving you names, it's giving you details of the particular names of that slave, male, female, who was owned, and I'm simply saying to you that Muhammad owned slaves, black slaves. Now I'm saying to you, you don't own slaves, you know that's right or that's wrong. So I'm telling you that your conscience, your morality, your ethics is higher than Muhammad's. But you won't own slaves, but he did. How do you explain that?
As I said to you before, for me, I'm not knowledgeable on this subject. However,
That's what they want.
I do
They don't
know.
need to be
There's a man needs to be knowledgeable to know if they should have slaves or not.
I never said that, bro. But if you listen to what I'm saying,
go on.
then you'll get my point of view. What I'm saying to you, I don't know everything about this subject at all. Yeah, I've got no problem with that. You may be teaching me something new, which is brilliant. I can go home and do research. However, what I do know, however, is at the time when he came, slavery was common around the whole world.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
So as you said about common society, it's only been the past couple of 100 years that slavery has been abolished now. Do you agree?
By Christians.
By Christians, yeah.
By Christians, they were doing it themselves,
Okay,
weren't they?
but alright, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. However, I'm just trying to think logically, as you said, yeah? As I said, I don't know much about the subject. If he came at a time when slavery was right, everyone had slaves. And from the one or two little things I've seen about slavery that I've come across, it says that there's benefit and reward for free slaves.
When they ended it, he's trying to use
But at the same time, I understand you can't completely stop a whole system of slavery overnight like that. It's not going to happen. So there may be truth in what you're saying. I can't say that you're wrong. There may be truth that he traded. There may be truth that some got freed, some didn't. I don't know the context. However, I honestly don't believe I'm going to go home and Google it and see him saying, do you know what, Muslims, what we should do, we should slave our Jewish brothers, we should slave our Christian brothers, but don't give them no rights.
Himself enslaved Jewish. So at the Battle of Khaybar, when they beheaded the Jewish men, they took the females captive, and they were then shared amongst the people who went to battle. Some of them were sold, some of them were kept. I think, was it Sophia even that came from?
Yeah, he married her.
Yeah, and so that's an instant. I mean, and I don't want to get. I think you're one of the most sincere Muslims I've spoken to here. And what I would say is, you're like me. You pick a value, and you stick to that value. And we've all said, you find slavery in Judaism. It's in the Torah, as this gentleman was saying.
So then why would you follow Judaism?
So I follow Judaism because I think if you look like Islam, there are things in Islam which I find. Like,
so just to get it straight, sorry to cut you off, but there's slavery in all of our religions.
Yes.
So we're all on the same table.
So but the difference, hold on. But the distinction is, for me, the very person who I use as an example, Jesus Christ, he never owned slaves, he never had slaves.
But there was okay,
hold on. He never, ever proclaimed that Christians should go out and make slaves of other people.
Killing innocent
children. Hold on. The problem that I have with Muhammad is that Muhammad is the measuring stick of all Muslims. You take your ethics and your morality from Muhammad. This is why
So in the Bible,
today
you have
Islam
all these
is justified in particular countries in the Middle East, in Africa, in Sudan, in Libya. Right? They don't see Islam because he practices it. That's
So
when my
you follow Christ, yeah? Correct.
as the command of evil.
So
What do you have in the Bible?
at the time when Christ was
Let's say
about, peace be upon him, there was slavery going on.
Back in innocent
most likely
Yeah, okay.
by the Romans.
So was there a law to say that slavery was wrong?
By the Romans? I doubt it.
No.
By Jesus, he's saying that
I'm
Jesus.
just saying, the commandments, whatever Jesus followed as a Jew, was there a law to say that slavery was wrong?
Jesus didn't specifically speak on the subject because primarily, this is my understanding, primarily because he was in a geographical place called Israel, right? And geographically Israel is very small. It was occupied by the Romans. They themselves were in bondage, right? And so he didn't actually go out and advocate slavery. Everything he spoke on, right, was regarding how men should react to other men, right? And something about your personality would shine through, and they would say, you know what,
So do you
make this
agree with
man.
that?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
if you was a slave, you wouldn't fight for freedom.
Well, how would you against your
No,
Romans?
I'm just asking you, because that's what you just said. You just said, so what you'll do is you'll be the best slave to show your slave master and hope that he says, you know what?
No,
I like this
what
one.
the Old Testament says. Okay,
No, I'm just saying what you said.
So to your point, Judaism says the same as what you're saying, which is that there's a theme within Judaism which is about the emancipation of slaves. So redeeming the Jews from bondage in Israel. Every certain set of years, you're supposed to set your slaves free. Yeah, you set your slaves free. So that same concept of manumission that you find in Islam is also found in Judaism. Yeah, but there is the concept that the slave can say no, they want to remain a slave. And because if you do that, like in Islam, you're saying there are benefits to being a slave in the sense that you have.
I didn't say there's benefits, but I was just wondering if they have rights. What rights they have.
But I think if you step away, I think one of the most helpful things you can do as an intelligent person in these debates is step away from the scripture, step away from because we follow our religions, and sometimes it blinds us, and we step away objectively, and we say, if I wasn't a Muslim or I wasn't a Jew, and I read in black and white text that it says here that slavery is okay, like if the Americans went to Iraq, killed the men, and then took the women slaves, would I agree with that? No, I wouldn't. You wouldn't either. And so then, it's what do we do within the frames of our religion then? Can we still be a practicing Jew or a practicing Muslim and find something that was practiced 1500 years ago or 3,500 years ago problematic? And can we find a source within our religion to actually justify our opposition to what's actually black and white? So I think there's many Muslims today who use Islam to say that slavery is wrong, even though in the text black and white it says it's permitted. But as you said, there's a theme to treat your slave well, to marry them in certain circumstances, to set them free, and so you can use that as
All
the
I've come across
foundation.
in regards to slavery recently is seeing that there was something to do with 3 things you can do, that's the best you can do. And one of them was to free slaves. So my whole thing is, with all this information you're coming with, why would he say that you should free slaves if the benefit is for him to make money or whatever it is that he's trying to do?
I think that the real poignant question here is what he said before. It's if slavery is wrong, it shouldn't just be that it's meritorious to set the slave free. It should be. Just finish. The Quran says that you can't eat bacon. That seems trivial to me compared to keeping a slave. Slavery seems worse than bacon. And so you think there should be a black and white line that says that slavery is wrong.
But it's the same thing
And I have
with
the same
alcohol.
problem.
But it's the same thing with alcohol. Alcohol is wrong in Islam, yeah? But at the time, people drank alcohol. And when he first came about, from what I know, some brothers in the group,
4 stages, yeah.
there were slow stages, there was different stages to slowly getting rid of alcohol.
Aggregation.
Yeah, it wasn't overnight like that. And what I'm trying to say, just as you said, logically speaking, or logically thinking, if slavery was a massive thing that was going on around the world, all I'm saying is I don't think it will be abolished overnight like that, just because he said it. So he may say free slaves, as I believe he said, but there may be still to do with trading or marrying slaves or this and the other.
So I hold the same.
So what are you saying that somehow that slavery can be justified?
No, he's not. He's saying he's
No, I'm willing to answer
I'm
that.
not saying slavery can be justified. I'm saying slavery should be abolished, obviously. Yeah. And I'm saying I expect
Through the works of Muhammad, you see that he's working to
that Muhammad, peace be upon him, would not say you can continue being slaves. So if he came to the people at the time and said to them, stop slaving people, then I don't think he's going to say that and then use it to his own benefit.
Can I ask you really?
It wouldn't really make sense if you go to war, your women
So
and
can
children
I ask
get
you a
taken.
question on this?
Yeah.
So I buy that argument, but I apply that same argument you said there. I apply that to Judaism and Christianity. And so what I'm saying with that is, the nations that first set their slaves free were built on Judeo-Christian philosophies. So at the time when the Christians and the Jews in the West were emancipating and freeing their slaves, it was still legal within Islam. And if what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, like that should be what a Muslim looks for. But I think that's a more modern way of looking at Islam, because otherwise you'd have the slave-free movements would have come from Arabia rather than Europe.
Abolitionists.
The abolitionists would have come from the Middle East rather than from Western Europe. But they came from
Not
Western
necessarily.
Europe.
Not necessarily.
But they came
I
from
could be
Western.
Muslim and still do things that I'm not meant to do as a Muslim. But that hasn't
I
anything
agree.
to do
I
with
agree.
religion.
Same with Jews and Christians.
Yeah, so we
But-
can't really look at the people, what they do.
As a whole, you'd expect if there was a key philosophy on freeing the slaves, that would manifest itself within those communities. Like we definitely find Tawheed.
So by Christians freeing the slave, abolishing slavery, you're saying, and leading the way in the Western world. Yeah. So realistically, what you're trying to say then is they should be role models for us in the Western world.
I think in some areas we should definitely look to Christians and Jews and Muslims as role models. Muslims are good in certain areas where we should look towards them. Christians are good in some areas where we should look towards them. Jews are good. But I think the abolitionists, they came from the West. They were the first to really push the emancipation of slaves.
They were the first.
Not the first, but one of the first. And certainly they were the ones that
So you don't think Muhammad peace be upon him years ago abolished slavery?
No, he didn't abolish because he kept slaves.
He didn't denounce slavery.
You
He
can
didn't say that
release
was
a
wrong.
slave,
But he kept
but that doesn't
slaves.
necessarily mean that he's an abolitionist in
Okay,
Islam.
so-
he himself kept slaves.
He abolished bacon, he didn't abolish slavery. It's absolutely haram for a Muslim to eat bacon. It's
So-
not haram for a Muslim to keep a slave.
So you're saying that my religion says today I'm allowed to have a slave?
Yes.
The Quran does say that.
Now I know as our conversation, as a Muslim, you would never do that. Your religion will say you can do many things.
But
that you
obviously,
just-
no. But if I'm following a belief that I pray 5 times a day, I'm not going to do it if it's telling me to do things that are wrong. Yeah. So I just want to make this clear. So you're saying when I go home and I go on Google, I will be able to find text that says I can now grab you, take you home, and have you as my slave.
No, I think the context is either you acquire a slave, you purchase them, or in a time of war they're taken captive, as you were
So
saying.
purchase an existing slave.
Purchase an existing
Okay,
slave.
so it's not about getting new slaves then.
No, if you go
Unless
to
it's
war,
during
if
war.
you go to war, which Islam went to war all the way from Arabia to Al-Andalus to Spain, and Muslim armies marched, 60,000 troops marched from Arabia to North Africa. And so in a time of war, yes, you can take slavery, but in those wars, Muslims often initiated those conflicts. Yes. Otherwise, how did you end up in Spain?
Okay,
Or the Mamelukes. You have the black slaves and then you have the white slaves.
We've in Spain, were there Jews there at the time?
The Jews opened the gates of Europe to the Muslim armies. So yeah.
Okay, so when the Muslims ruled Spain for however many hundreds of years, Jews lived there.
Yeah.
Were they slaves?
Yes, many Jews were. So Khaybar, Jews were taken slave.
So
So,
then
Muhammad himself went to war with the Jews. The Muslims say the Jews broke the treaty, which I'm not going to argue with your history. We don't have a tradition of Khaybar, but we're told that the Jews and the Muslims went to war because the Jews broke the treaty. The males above the age of puberty, so young boys, were beheaded in batches, and their heads were brought to
If they're
Muhammad.
above puberty, then they're not young boys.
Well, I disagree. A 13-year-old or a 9-year-old boy that started puberty, in my mind, is a child.
But back then, would they not be married?
But just say it one, stay at one point at a time. Say it one point. So what I'm saying is, in this battle, Muhammad and his armies captured Jewish slaves
And killed men.
and killed men. Yeah. He didn't take male slaves in that battle.
So as you said about staying on the point, so when he was in Spain, or not when he was in Spain,
He wasn't in
when
Spain.
Muslims were in Spain, and the Moors, whatever, and the Jews lived with them, were all the Jews enslaved. Because if Islam says that we should,
So Muhammad put in provisions to protect the Jews in the constitution
why
of
would we do
Medina.
that if we can slave them?
Because Islam isn't this barbaric religion that goes around enslaving the world. What we're saying is,
Okay, I thought that's how it sounded a minute ago.
I'm being really, really clear. I'm saying, in a time of war, according to Islam, you can capture slaves, yeah, from the people that you're fighting. And I'm saying that Islam has expanded its borders with force all the way to Spain and Europe. Like they were fighting in Europe.
So when they left Spain, when they got beaten in war, whatever, did the Jews not leave with them?
No, so the Jews left in the Inquisitions.
Did they not go with them to Morocco or something like that?
So can you conflate history? The Moroccans let the Jews in. It's not when they left. It's when they left. The Christians that were left over progressively put in very, very harsh laws for the Jews, and eventually basically expelled them or forced them to convert to Christianity. And then they fled to Morocco. They fled to Turkey.
And the Muslims were cool with the Jews.
Muslims and Jews have very good relations for most of our history. Because people tend to look at things in black and white. Like either Islam's really evil or it's really good.
No,
and
but it's just because how the conversation started and I got wrote to be on YouTube and all that is because he made it sound to me as if Muhammad was saying slave everyone. He didn't free slaves. He said he didn't free slaves. He said that he traded them, this, that, and other.
He freed slaves. He freed slaves.
I know. But what I'm trying to say is, it may not be as black and white as you originally stated.
But the
because you made it initially sound.
The only black and white thing
but
is,
anyway,
there is one black and white line which we drawn in the sand, and which we all disagree with, is slavery. Is slavery wrong? Yes, we all agree.
I've got to go home and have my dinner.
Aki, it's been fantastic talking. Jazakallah.
Honest Muslim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.